Welcome back to H-Lock Gaming. This image actually came out last week. I thought about taking my video down, editing it, adding this in the end, but I thought I'd just put it on this week's video. So let's take a look. Okay, so they added this because 30,000 people signed up for the beta, so that's a pretty cool milestone, right? Especially when you consider what the heck's that Marvel game that just came out? Marvel Mystic Mayhem, I think the name of it was. It was a pretty short beta. I think it was like less than 2 weeks, and they had 5,000 people. So Godforge trying to get all 30,000 people in will be a pretty good beta. Probably get a lot of good feedback. It's a good sign that they think they can handle that many to begin with. So I take that as a positive. Anyways, Ganesh, I believe that's how you say that. That's how I've heard it said before. When I looked it up, it said it's the god, or not the god, deity, same difference though, pretty much, right? Of clearing the path to the gods and removing everyday obstacles. So, clearing obstacles to make it easier to reach the gods, what could that be in terms of a playable character? I'm thinking, cleanser probably, right? Some type of, yeah, cleanser, you can remove debuffs on you. Clearing the path, possibly throwing down some debuffs as well, maybe control champion, in terms of clearing the path, progressing, making it easier to progress. So I'm thinking possibly a cleanser or a debuffer, a support, some type. Probably not a main damage dealer, but those are kind of just my initial thoughts. So let's take a look though at it. It looks pretty cool, and keep in mind this is just the concept art, obviously not in game. I was thinking too, it will be interesting to see. I think they showed one other god they're gonna have with multiple arms. And I'm always interested to see how well games utilize that, because if you think of it in terms of everyday life, we're you know, 2 arms, 2 legs. So if you look sometimes at how they program spiders, let's say, they're not always fully utilizing all 8 legs. And I think that's just from our mindset, how we view the world. You don't have multiple limbs. So interesting to see what they do with that. Hopefully something cool. And then kind of over here without the armor. Ceremonial axe. Okay. How's that really different from there? Oh, the pants. I see. So this might be a little bit further along. So maybe this is closer to end game than like this stuff over here. But this looks super cool. I don't know. They're both good. Or maybe, yeah, pants are a little bit different. Ankles are a little bit different. Yeah, actually, this is further along. So that's the furthest part along. Either way, pretty cool. Let me know down below what you think. Maybe what kind of a character this might be. Let's get to the Tuesday video. All right, as always, I'll have this up in the background muted. So this week's video, I actually kind of wondered if there's going to be any juicy tidbits in there, since Susie is kind of interviewing Brad on what he does. He kind of started off in her position when he first started with Fateless, and now he does game design, which is pretty cool because I've been watching Brad, aka Chosen, for a long time on his Raid channel. To be honest, I never really regularly followed content creators, watched their channels, anything like that until Brad came along. He makes a joke in here about how he loves spreadsheets. I think that might be why I kind of started regularly following him, because I'm a show me the numbers guy, and he would always, like he says, bust out the spreadsheet. So I don't know. For whatever reason, it kind of struck a chord with me, and is honestly why I started following him. I do kind of regularly watch other people within the raid space now. Not a big Twitch guy. I do watch Darth because he's an Alaskan and I am, so I kind of support him in that sense. I usually leave him on in the background, kind of like a podcast when I have time. But the point of all that is, I've been watching him for a while. As far as I know, Brad doesn't have any like formal education with coding or anything of that nature. If he does, hasn't really talked about it. So it's kind of cool to see a guy. Before I know he was in finance because he's talked about that to go, from YouTube to game design. So that's pretty cool. So, you know, just you never know where your life's gonna end up as long as you put effort in somewhere. So not that everyone listening necessarily wants to do game design, but you just put in whatever you can towards a goal, and you'll be surprised where you're at in a year, 2 years. Anyways, so this is kind of a Q&A for Brad, and they talked about his role now as kind of kit design, which was news to me. I didn't really know exactly what he did. I didn't know if he was doing hardcore coding. I had no idea what he was actually doing. But it sounds like he does the initial kits, the research, kind of figures out how they could fit into the Godforge game, comes up with the concept. They have a meeting about it with the coders. The coders kind of say, this is how we could do it, or we can't do this, blah, blah, blah. So then he kind of has to retool the kit to make it fit better with what they can do in the game as far as how they've built their engine. So that's essentially what he does on a regular basis. Um, he's also working right now, it sounds like, on Susie asked him about the victory screen. At the end of a battle, what do you want to see? And this is where he mentioned the Excel spreadsheets, which he wants to see that, kind of granular data so if a champ's really pulling their way, and not just in damage, healing, etc., all that kind of stuff. So if they get that in the game, he didn't say where they're at in that process, but it sounds like something they want to have be very helpful to tell you what your champs are or not doing well. Then she asked him, I guess she got this from the community. I believe another content creator asked this one. Sorry, I forget who it was. I think it was Amazing Adam, but I could be wrong. Are there any buffs, debuffs, sets like that were too strong so far in making the game? And he said, no, absolutely. But he said it's also hard to tell because they don't have a really fully playable beta where they can test stuff yet. So he said he won't know that until they get further along in the internal process and they can test it, which sounds more like an internal alpha before the beta we're going to get. So that kind of lets you know why they push the beta back, because they don't even really have the ability to see if some of this stuff is too strong. It's, still pretty early in terms of that. Then they asked, is there anything you've had to scrap in the game so far? And he said, honestly, no. Even with the limited resources they have, compared to, he used Amazon Studios, with the $500 million budget. They've been able to get in everything they wanted, at least in some sense, maybe, not fully, but they've never had to fully scrap something, which is kind of interesting because I believe Simon did talk about how they scrapped their sort of lineup mechanic from an earlier development of the game. They were going to have, if you're in the front or the back, it would affect certain stats and mechanics on how skills work. So I wonder if that's not necessarily a resource thing and they just couldn't get it to work how they wanted to. So that's kind of interesting there. Favorite mechanic in the game. Oh, that's what I just talked about. Yeah, he hasn't really had to drop anything so far. He did say one challenge is skill wording, as far as I always think of man, I wish I could remember the dude's name right now. I'm Mobile Gamer. Yeah, that's what it is. Mobile Gamer / she used to be called OMG, plays a Marvel Strike Force. Yes, Marvel Strike Force. He always had the joke. I used to play that there's how the devs design it to work. There's how it reads and how it actually performs. So I think that's what he's getting at, because he talked about some skill that Allure has in Raid where it makes it sound like it attacks 3 people at random, but what it actually does is targets one and then hits 2 randomly. So he said they're acutely aware of that and they're constantly having to, adjust things and go back and read other people's kits to make sure it matches. So Also an encouraging sign when you have that attention to detail, and Chosen being, somebody who's in charge of that does not surprise me at all. I don't know if he's in charge of it being, but it at least sounds like he's someone who's catching it. If you watched his old content when he covered Raid, he's very good at, having critiques on how you can make small changes to kits and have them work better. So it means he kind of has that mindset. And he's also pointed out, essentially those type of things where this is how it reads, but that's not what it does. So he's already very familiar with that from what I've seen. And then kind of the last question they asked, even though he's a part of the development team now, it wasn't necessarily someone he'd like to see in the game because he does have some control over that. What his favorite hero is so far. He said that it's actually not out yet, so he couldn't tell us. But he said when it's out, he will make sure to let us know it's his favorite and why. Because she asked, what's kind of your favorite passion project that you've put the most development into? And he kind of wanted to describe that as what it sounded like, but he can't yet because the champion's not out. And I did forget this. They mentioned this right at the beginning. They didn't say when, but they said on the Fateless YouTube channel, there will be a Q&A with the developers. I assume Brad will be there, probably Suzu will be running it, but some of the other people that you've seen in the Thursday podcast where they do the longer form videos, some of those guys should be there. They didn't say who yet or when because, they said they're really pushing to get that beta out. And I think they said they're going to a few other conventions, or they have, which kind of might have delayed stuff a day or two. But anyways, that's pretty much what happened on this, and now we'll get to the Thursday podcast. I believe the guest this week is going to be Ragewood, so let's see what he's usually pretty good at sussing stuff out, finding these little hidden clues, so it'll be interesting to see what kind of questions he asked. All right, so here we go, Ragewood. I will say right off the bat that when I'm doing these videos kind of like this week in Godforge, I usually take notes and then record right after, so it's kind of fresh on my mind. And I usually have about 1 to 1.5 pages. And in this one, I have almost 3 pages, which is kind of what I thought that Ragewood would be getting us some juicy details, or at least he attempted to. This one's a pretty good one, so if you're just watching this for the summary, you might want to go check his out as well. And I will say off the bat, when they were first talking, Simon said that Ragewood's guesses seem to be right about 95% of the time. So if you're not subscribed to Ragewood, go check him out. All right, so the first question they kind of went over was a reserve or reservoir energy system. If you take a day or a few days off or something. All right, so Simon mentioned, about after 3 days he ran out of energy and didn't really want to use gems on his free to play. So they said they want something, but he says they also don't want to do it in a way for when they do events, it encourages hoarding. Like you specifically stop playing for a week because a event's coming, so you want to kind of build up that energy. So they didn't say what it will be, but there'll be something. So you will have the opportunity to, take a few days off, which I enjoy because there's definitely weekends. Not in terms of not liking a game, but I just don't want to play. I don't want to deal with trying to do something on my phone while I'm out doing stuff. So that's good. He asked about reward drops based on the stuff we saw after the. Actually, was it the same footage? I don't remember. There's a couple games cons where we saw some drop stuff. So they said there will be gear and a weapon slot, and the weapon slot will be used in a new way that we haven't seen. And they did use that a lot, but I wonder if they meant in mobile gotcha games or what they meant, because some of the stuff, how they kind of described it, I'm like, I feel like I have sort of seen something like that before, but not in a mobile game, but we'll have to wait and see. Saf is usually the one who said that, and from what I've seen, he's a pretty smart guy, so I don't think he would embellish that or misrepresent it, He then asked about a attunement system. I guess that Dirk revealed in a podcast. I didn't see that one. I did see him and JKG talk about it. Uh, he, they wouldn't really say too much about it. They didn't say if it would be team wide or individual characters or whatever. They did say it'll be an original system again. It'll be some type of enhancement. And related to the gear, they said, they haven't decided if it'll be free to swap or you'll have to pay or whatever. And Simon used the example, he doesn't, in games where you can just swap for free, sometimes he finds it annoying because it's like you're constantly rebuilding characters, which I actually agree with. That kind of bothers me as well sometimes. So I'm definitely on the same wavelength as him on that one. All right. Let's see. Oh, then the example they used related to that, with the gear swapping is sometimes you get a good champion, but you have to wait to build them because you can't get the stuff you need, for the systems in terms of where you have to pay or you need specific gear. So they said they kind of have that on their mind as well when they're building champions and gear, but they didn't really say what they're going to do about it, but they are conscious of it. Then they asked about imprints, which I guess came up on the same podcast with the attunement system. Again, they didn't really say what it'll be, but it'll be something with dupes. And they said, it's going to be very impactful, but it's not like other games where you get a good character, but then until you get 10 copies of them, they don't really work as well as they could. They don't want that, but they want good duplicate champions to be just as impactful when you get them as the first time you get that champion. He said, maybe it'll be a premium currency of some sort. They clearly have something in mind, but we're being very tight-lipped on that one, so we'll have to wait and see. Next, Ragewood asked him about, the camera angle. How do you essentially put the camera in a way that it doesn't look weird to have some of these larger units on screen with smaller units or creatures, etc.? He said, they're acutely aware of that. They mostly, they look for clipping and things like that and angles, so they're not blocking certain things, so they're aware of it. It's still a work in progress, but that's, they're working on it. Not a ton to say there. Then Rage would ask, what factions would be in the beta. Simon threw that one over to Saf. He didn't really confirm any, but he said Olympus probably. Ragewood named a few based on how flushed out they are. If you want to know which ones are, built more than the other, go actually check out his site. Actually, let me check so I can tell you what his site is. I might link it down below as well. Hold on. Yeah, it's ragewoodgaming.com. I'll try to link to that down below. Good site if you want to see what's out and covered so far. Beta factions. Okay, talked about that. Favorite looking. Brad's is not out. Saf's also is not out. But he did say there's something in the Babylonian faction that he really likes. Simon says Hell is his favorite so far for 3D, but there's some good 2D stuff coming that hasn't been revealed yet, but he says they could, kind of take over his top spot. Any big names left out? They said yes. Big names left out at launch, when they finally get. He said yes, there's stuff they wanted to originally get, but don't think it's out for launch. But with the way they're designing the game, there's no reason that what they've done so far on them won't be useful for the future. And they already have some essentially planned out that will either just be dropped or part of events or etc. later. So they kind of have some of that planned out already. Then they asked Ragewood, what his characters he'd like to see. I'm not familiar with really any of these. He kind of went deep. Simon actually asked him, do you have any type of education in mythology, or is it just something you study? And he said, he did in school kind of study it somewhat, and is somewhat of a passion of his learning about these. So it makes sense with if you watch some of his videos, how he can call stuff ahead of time. But anyways, somebody named Veli, not sure who that is. With the recent reveal of Quetzalcoatl, he said there's like a kind of an opposing jaguar god. He said the name. I'm not even going to try to repeat it. I don't know what the heck it was, but he said, in their mythology, they kind of go back and forth with who's in charge. So that could be a good one. And then he said for the Egyptian Erebus and Nyx, he made it sound kind of like one's like almost like the god of night and god of day, like they kind of almost control the day and night cycle. And that's about it for this week's podcast. So if you like what I'm doing, give me a thumbs up, and if you wouldn't mind throwing me subscribe if you like it, and as well go over to Ragewood's channel and check out his videos and throw him a subscribe. He's definitely a great channel. And thanks for listening or watching. Bye.